Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Ghana, and all other major platforms, which includes Alexa. All you have to do is tell Alexa to play Dead Headspace podcast for the latest episode every Monday and Thursday. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello.
And today we're talking with author, reviewer, and co-host of the popular podcast show, This Is Horror, Bob Pastorella. How's it going, Bob?
It's going great. I'm really glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Pretty special for me and Brennan to have you guys as like the first Halloween special because we are fans of your show. And we're curious as to what your answers are going to be for the book that you worked on with Michael, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
So first question is, what got you into horror?
Oh man, I knew this was coming too. So let's see here. It started at a really young age. When growing up, we basically grew up in before we had a TV, no cable, 3 channels. But I was very fortunate that they showed a lot of really cool stuff. And so I grew up at a time that some of the shows were on primetime. So some of the TV shows that I watched that were actually on primetime that, that most people can get now on Blu-ray or DVD were the Night Stalker, which if it wasn't for the Night Stalker, you would not have the X-Files. And also some of the latter seasons of Night Gallery. Now, some of those seasons of Night Gallery were actually, I guess they were right at the point of becoming syndicated. So, but to actually see those on TV and to actually watch them and have nightmares from them kind of informed me that even though I liked being scared, that I could possibly have nightmares from this. And there was something about that attracted me, that made me really kind of, get into the thrill of it. Like, I think we were talking with some people the other night and we talked about how it's almost like you want to see how scared it's like, how far can you go with being scared, movie wise, we had Saturday afternoons. They showed, what's called like basically like a chiller thriller. They would have like these movies in the afternoons, and they have some guy with some weird voice. Hey, today, and they show like these old Hammer films and some of the Universal films, and then my dad, he liked scary stuff, but he liked it to be kind of authentic. He didn't like things to be hokey. But he liked a good story, and he liked stuff that was very intriguing and very unique and different. And so, probably one of my earliest films, and I know I've mentioned this many times, is Let's Scare Jessica to Death. If you haven't seen it, it is it's basically a character study in a spiraling madness and depression, and it is it's very ambiguous. In the events that unfold. Is it a ghost? Is it a vampire? Is it in her head? Why do the people have these scars? It's just, really cool movie. And if you haven't seen it, you check it out. So from a very young age, I've always been into horror. It was, in science fiction and things like that. And I guess I'm fortunate at 53 to kind of grow up in an era where there was a lot of good stuff as far as TV and movies. Now, book wise, there wasn't really much. We tore through, the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and the three investigators. I grew up before Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and Christopher Pike. So I missed a lot of that stuff that, a lot of the younger generations have gotten into. I just completely bypassed it, So, but yeah, it's from a young age. I've always been into horror.
Yeah, I want to pinpoint Let's Scare Jessica to Death because in the most recent episode that Silver Shamrock's podcast, Killing Time with Silver Shamrock, Ken McKinley talks with Ronald Kelly, and that's actually one of Ron's favorite movies. And I just heard them talking about that last week. So that sounds. If all three of you guys are saying that's the movie to watch, I got to check that out. You guys know your shit.
Yeah, it's really creepy. I mean, it starts off creepy. It starts off with the woman doing grave carvings, and they're gonna, they have this house that they're moving into, and she's got her friends, and then they discover someone else is living in the house already. So I mean, it just gets kind of creepy from there, and the woman, she's got a history. She's got a history of depression and things like that. So, and for this film to be like early '70s and to hit upon some of the things that we see so much of today is just I always, now it's like fascinating. Um, does it hold up for today? I think so. I think part of its charm is the fact it was a made for TV movie.
Hmm.
And also part of its charm is that it's really ambiguous in how it does things. And you didn't really see that back in the '70s. You had like the Night Stalker. You knew that after 30 minutes, it's like, this thing's a vampire. Weird deal. And the next one, this guy's like he's a strangler or something. So he's so you have a clear cut idea what you're dealing with. This was a little bit more ambiguous, and so but at the same time, I think it's also right for a remake in the right hands.
Hmm.
But time will tell. We'll see.
So who do you any thoughts on who the right hands could be? Thinking of modern filmmakers?
It would have to be somebody who can do the slow burn really good. So, because, a lot of times, sometimes people say the word slow burn and it's got like some kind of negative connotation, and it really doesn't. It just means that it's not like an action packed, like an Evil Dead type movie or, Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. It's going to be something that's a little bit more cerebral. You're going to have to think about what's going on. You're going to have to watch it and pay attention. So, somebody who could probably pull that off, Osgood Perkins. I mean, it's like you could say like the easy names like Ari Aster and people like that. But I think Perkins would be good. Ben Wheatley maybe. Robert Eggers. There's
that was going to be my choice, Robert Eggers, for the simple fact that The Witch is. I love it. I know that it's a polarizing film, but anytime I hear a New England story, being a guy from Massachusetts, I'm like, all right, ears already perked up. But even if it wasn't set in that area, that's a damn good movie.
It is a good movie, and I like the way that it pushed the ending. It was
yes.
It didn't shy away from something that's like, oh well, she chose the devil, now she needs to die. It's
Heavy
like,
metal,
no, she's
baby.
gonna live deliciously. Yeah. I thought that was really cool that they did it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Brendan, you got anything else on this subject, or you want to go on to the next?
I was gonna just put in my 2 cents and actually echo you, Pat. I don't think I'd ever heard of that movie, Let's Scare Jessica to Death, maybe 2 weeks ago, and now I keep hearing it. It seems like I can't get away from it. So that's definitely something I'm gonna have to be on the lookout for.
Yeah.
Actually, Bob, one of the things that caught my attention that you said, that kind of drew you into the genre was pushing yourself, kind of trying to discover how far you could go, being scared before it went too far. So I'm wondering if you have any early examples of maybe pushing a little too far and saying, nope, got to back it up a step.
Yeah. Night Gallery, I believe it's episode 3. It's called The Doll. I can't watch it today. Had bad dreams. And it's funny too, because on our podcast we were talking to John Padgett, and John Padgett, of course, he did a lot of the stuff. He's kind of the school of Ligotti, but one of the things they deal with is like what I call non-humans, mannequins, puppets, things like that. Jonathan is a very skilled ventriloquist. And when Michael asked him what got him into it, and he said, he goes, well, there was this old show on TV called The Night Gallery. And I was like, I knew exactly where it was going. And I was like, the doll. And he was like, yes. And I can't, I barely can even look at pictures of the doll. It's just a little bitty doll who's very ugly, but it's just, it gave me bad dreams, and that's probably the point where I'm gonna have to say no, and later on in life, I developed what they call night terrors. I'm sure y'all have heard of that. I haven't had any in a long time. Mentioning it can trigger it, so I'll probably have one within about 2 weeks. It's weird. They have a whole show about night terrors. That's I think it's called The Nightmare, that I highly recommend. But I used to have them pretty bad, and I can only imagine having that kind of nightmare with a night terror. I'd probably have to be in a hospital. I'd be probably have to have some form of long form therapy because it's pretty rough.
I'm gonna feel so guilty if we hear from you in like a week or two. Be like, you guys really messed me up. I'm never coming back on again.
Wouldn't be the first time.
So, is it just specifically that episode, or is it other doll related fare? That
No. It's not. I typically don't like horror movies with dolls anyway. I guess because of that. And I say it don't like in kind of a weird way. They really creep me out. But it's not just that. I mean, I don't know. I think it was a combination of a lot of things. There's another Night Gallery episode called Cold Air, which is basically it was an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's story, and some of the imagery at the end of the segment has stuck with me forever, and it has ended up in my nightmares. So that's, and I don't. Night Gallery was on Hulu, so I highly recommend it, and it's really cool. It's hosted by Rod Serling, and it's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like a darker Twilight Zone, but it's I don't know, it's they got some classic stuff on there, and then they have some hit and miss. You'd be like, well, that was okay. It lasted about 3 seasons, so it was I don't know, but I've seen most of them, and they're kind of instrumental, in I guess the formation of things that kind of got me into horror.
When Child's Play came out, were you right away like, nope, not gonna watch that? Or did you actually watch that film?
Oh, I watched it. I thought it was okay. And of course, the whole thing with Child's Play is it's almost like kind of like this horror comedy.
Yeah.
Primarily because you have a wisecracking doll, perfectly voiced by Brad Dourif, and who I absolutely love. He's a national treasure. The guy is probably one of the greatest actors we've ever had, and he's considered, considerably underrated because most people are like, who's that guy? Oh yeah, Brad Dourif. What's he doing now? Brad has been in some of the greatest movies ever made. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He played
I did not know
the Gemini Killer. You did not know that? He played Billy Bibbits.
I watched the film. I really like it. I got the book too. Haven't read that though.
The book is really cool. The book is, I believe, it's been a while since I read it, but it's from the POV of the chief. So
okay.
It takes you a while to figure out it's from the POV of the chief. But once you do, and if you've seen the movie, it's pretty cool.
Wait, I just looked up a picture of Brad Dourif. I've seen him. Isn't he in like A Nightmare on Elm Street as well? Child's Play 1, 2, The Exorcist 3.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was. No, he's not. I've seen him in other films. Holy
Pat,
shit!
you might honestly know him from Lord of the Rings too.
Oh my god!
He was in that whole
Yeah,
trilogy,
he was Wormtongue. I
Grima.
just saw.
Yeah. He was in.
Wow.
He was in the
He's
show
in
Deadwood.
Deadwood.
If you ever caught that.
Halloween 2, the remake.
He
Okay,
was in
holy shit. And he
yeah,
did the
he's
voice
been in
of...
a lot of stuff.
Yep.
He's been in an Aliens film. He was in Alien Resurrection.
So,
Okay.
Bob, I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but I'm wondering if you have ever tried to work dolls into your fiction, or if you would ever try to do that.
No, I haven't had an opportunity to do that. So I haven't thought of a really good story that would fit in there. And it's not just, I can handle, like, what's the name of that film that came out about 10 years ago? Dead Speak, something like that.
Oh, Dead Silence?
Dead Silence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
was creepy.
that is a creepy movie, and I can sit
Yeah.
there and I can watch the whole damn thing. Um, you know, uh, and it doesn't really get to me that bad. It's just that one. I guess when I was little, that one image just kind of, it really got to me. You know, but I mean, I would say that the cold air episode, especially the segment at the end, that imagery has stuck with me longer. You know, and because I mean, I can say basically I probably had a bad dream and it showed up probably within the last month. So this is going on for, golly, I was probably about 7 or 8 when I seen it, so over 40 years. I'm old. So it's just I have not rewatched that episode. As soon as I seen it in the listing, because when they had Night Gallery on Hulu, I was just kind of skip over that. So
I I I get your point totally, where it's that kind of one specific instance. Like, you know, if there's one trope or whatever you don't like, there's definitely going to be one, um or at least there's going to be specific occurrences of that, or ways it can happen. Like, for example, when Pat, when you brought up Child's Play, it's funny because I don't think I ever thought about it before, but I don't really think of that as like a doll movie.
That's
Um,
fair.
uh,
It's a silly movie.
it's a weird thing to say because it's obviously about a doll.
Yeah.
But when I think of creepy dolls, I think of like the porcelain faces and the very like subtle movements and
Oh,
stuff.
Annabella.
yeah,
Annabelle,
Or
something like
Annabelle.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that's a little bit more subdued and not, running around screaming like a maniac wielding a knife and cracking wise as they're, plunging that knife into your gut. Um, all right. Well, you know what? I think that's enough about dolls. Bob, we want to talk about This Is Horror, and I want to hear from your perspective about your kind of entrance onto that show.
well, let's see how it all started. I was in, to kind of go back in 2011. I was in an anthology called the Warmed and Bound Anthology, and a lot of us were in a online forum. This is kind of right around the time that Facebook was starting to kick in, but we had an online forum that was for fans of Will Christopher Bear, Craig Clevenger, and Stephen Graham Jones. And in this forum, not only would we have, like it's kind of like the way Discord's set up, you have different subforums and things like that. Not only did we have our own little things that we talked about, movies and books and all kinds of stuff, but we also got to correspond with, in the forum, with Will Christopher Bear, Craig Clevenger, and Stephen Graham Jones. So there was points in your tenure there that you could actually be 3 o'clock in the morning in a sub forum having a chat with Stephen Graham Jones talking about some obscure movie that he just watched. Because you never know. You check the forum and you're like, oh well, there's 5. Whoa, wait a second. There's 15 comments. What the hell's going on? And sure enough, Stephen Graham Jones, have y'all ever seen this movie? And you're like going, oh yeah, I've seen it. He goes, I need to talk to someone about it right now. So, and it was really cool because you could correspond with these people. So I was in this anthology that we created, and it got reviewed on a podcast called Booked. And Booked really liked it. And what Booked did is they had an interview with every writer who submitted to that or who was in that anthology. So we all got a Booked interview. And they had, once that happened, Booked decided to get and create their own anthology. It was invitation only. So this is like about a year later. So the only way you could be invited is to have been interviewed in, on their podcast. So we built up that anthology. We decided to donate the proceeds to charity, and it got reviewed by This Is Horror, and they did a crossover episode with Booked. And that's back when it was Michael David Wilson and Dan Howard. And they basically, being a horror website and a horror podcast, they chose the pretty much the three most horrific stories in there. And they really liked, my story. At that point, Michael David Wilson reached out to me, asked me if I wanted to be on the podcast. And I got on, the podcast with him. It was the first time that we ever met. So I was on the podcast, and he asked me if I wanted, possibly, write reviews, do some columns. And then I became basically, in charge of reviewing. Went from that to, basically website manager. And then Dan Howard, who was the host the co-host at the time, Dan, a lot of things happened for Dan at one time that are really, really good things. His job kind of ramped up. He got married. He bought his first house. He has his first kids. His life has changed in such a way, and Michael's trying to build the podcast up in such a way that they're not able to really kind of meet up. And so Dan had to drop out. Dan does occasionally, come on. We've had me, Michael, and Dan on, and it's always a pleasure to have Dan on. He's great. He's super, super nice guy. But I did some guest co-host spots, and then when Dan, I guess it just got to the point where he just couldn't do it anymore. Then Michael asked me, if I wanted to be involved as a permanent co-host. And, my whole thing is like, hey, I can do that as long as we can work around my schedule too. And so that's what we've done. We've had to do, a lot of time gymnastics and stuff like that because Michael lives, first of all, in the future on another planet. So that's the way you got to really kind of look at it. It's like, where does he live? Not here. And he lives in the future. He doesn't know things because he's not paying attention to things that have already happened. But we make the time work. We make it all work. And there's, it's a lot of fun. And you get to, to talk. If you would have told me, like, probably 6 years ago, you just said, hey, you're going to be on a Skype call with Kathy Koja, who, I like worship the ground that she walks on. I'd have said, you're a fucking liar, because there's just no way. And so it was so hard for me not to just totally geek out when she was, when we had her on the podcast. So, and it was really difficult because I could have just went, I could have pulled that, the Chris Farley thing, when he's like interviewing Paul McCartney. I could have done that, but I didn't. I behaved myself. I didn't fanboy. And we had a really, really good discussion, and I know we'll have her back on. So, I mean, it's, you definitely, when you meet your fans, I mean, if you meet someone that you're a fan of, whether it's on a podcast, stuff like that, you want them to come back,
Yeah.
And you know, that's the whole key. You don't want them to be, well, they're never coming back. You know. So you want them to be able to come back and have a good time and have a pleasant time. And I think that we, you know, me and Michael have that kind of connection, and we can have that connection with our guests to where they always want to come back. And that's, you know, that's pretty good. We just kind of put them front and center and try not to geek out too much.
I would agree with that. I've said before, This Is Horror was really the first podcast within this, community that I discovered, and you guys definitely have a way of creating an environment that puts the guest at ease, and even if the conversation steers into, I guess I'd say, uncomfortable topics, but I mean controlled uncomfortable topics.
Mm-hmm.
Something that is interesting to talk about, but with that safety net of this is an okay place to kind of lay out all your feelings on the subject. And I don't think I've ever heard a conversation where, somebody bears their soul and then feels uncomfortable, seems uncomfortable afterwards. And that's a credit to you guys to establish that environment, because it's not an easy thing to do. I would imagine. I don't think we've quite gotten there yet. We've never had anybody cry on the show. I don't think. Pat, have you?
That's not true.
Oh, that's not true. That's right. I did make Pat cry once.
No, no. Not to put her on the spot, but since you brought up V Castro, it
Oh, that's
was
right. Yes.
it was touching what she talked about, and it meant a lot that she could say that to us.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
she said. Yeah, I gotta echo what Brennan said. Your show was not the first for me, but it was one of the first. My very first horror, quote unquote, horror community was Ink Heist. Then
Mm-hmm.
um, the horror show of Brian Keene. What got my attention with that was when that whole cheesine thing blew up, and I was like, all right, well, I don't really know much about it. So then I listened to this episode, and I was hooked. They knew their shit. They were not biased.
Mm-hmm.
They had their bias, like everyone, but they kept it. True journalistic intentions were very prevalent, and I just listened to every episode I could. I got into you guys, and I agree. You guys have a very comforting atmosphere. As a listener, I'm like, I just want to keep listening to you two talk, and I love how, like with me and Brennan, we just got the same Boran accent, both Boston boys, and you're Texan, he's from England. It's cool, man. It's like it's really neat. You guys are in same extent as me and Brennan. We're at this point in our life pen pals. Well, I don't know. Have you actually met Michael?
No, no, we will meet,
Oh, of
but
course.
you know, we haven't. Uh, you know, and it's there is a dichotomy. I mean, when I first came on, they had, you know, some people didn't know who I was, and they were kind of like, you know, what, who's that redneck guy I got on the show now? And I got that old boy on there, you know. And then you know, there was a time when especially when Max Booth is on the show, it's there's like literally there's no script, we can't even get a word in
Mm.
usually. And because and if you say anything to him that especially if it's something he can find online, he's gonna latch onto it, and that's your show. He makes my face hurt from laughing.
I hear that.
He is just, and you know, now I've met Max in person multiple times, and he is just as funny in person. The first time I met him, went to the San Antonio Book Fair, and had a good day. Had a good day selling books out in the sun. And then we decided to go get some. Me, him, and his wife Lori decided to go get some food on the Riverwalk. So we went to a Mexican restaurant on the Riverwalk, and while we were waiting to get into the Mexican restaurant, these pigeons decided that they wanted to attack Max. So I thought that was really kind of strange. And Max is kind of like, "What the fuck's going on here?" And then the pigeon came back, and where we're sitting by the Riverwalk, there was a couple of pigeons behind us, and this pigeon and another pigeon decided to make furious love right behind Max. and it was one of the funniest things that I've ever seen. I mean, these two pigeons were like going at it. They were hot,
Oh my
and Max
goodness.
is like, "What the fuck is going on?" You know, and and of course if he gets on me on something, I say, hey, at least I've never had any pigeons, just have sex, for me. He was like, oh, you had to bring that up, didn't you? you know so
I
he's probably one of our favorite guests because we never know what's going to happen. It's like completely unpredictable.
I have one story that's directly related to you and Michael. When we were originally talking about you guys coming on, just so the listeners know, it was supposed to be one episode, but time and schedules didn't line up. 3 different time zones. Life happened, and I talked to Max because we when we had him on months ago. I talked to Michael and I said, "Hey, you got any questions for him?" And he had one, and we used a fake name with his initials. Max knew who the question was from right away. So
Mm-hmm.
after we recorded, I told him our idea that we're gonna have you guys on. That was after we all of us talked, and he said, "Hey, could I get in on that?" And I'm like, "Yep." Long story short, he couldn't make it because and what his exact, well, paraphrase words were, I will be away all October on a secret mission in Michigan. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say what that is. He's been pretty much publicly open about it, as has, Mallerman, talking about how they're hanging out together and stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
but what was going to happen was his idea was I'd like to wear a ghost costume and at one part just appear and go Booth. And I said, "Hey, what's the likelihood that you could appear on Bob's screen? Like go to his house because I didn't know how far away you guys lived." And he said, 4 hour drive is kind of a little too far for a silly joke. So
Yeah.
I thought you may have been okay with it. I was nervous if Michael would have. I didn't know if he would like get upset. I'm sure he wouldn't, but I was nervous with his reaction if we pulled that off. Go ahead, Brennan.
I was just gonna say, if there's one person who would drive 4 hours for a practical joke, I think that's the one.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And he would have to turn, especially if he was still working at the hotel. It'd be like, "Hey, I gotta go," but it's only been 5 minutes. He can't, dude, come in. No, I gotta go. I gotta go. But yeah, he would totally do that. Him and Lori are they're really really cool. And it's he's I don't know. He can be kind of like on social media. It's weird because he can piss some people off. But he's one of the
Saw him going
nicest.
after Ramsey Campbell like 2 months ago.
Yeah, and he doesn't care. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the whole thing. He's like, what are they gonna do? Um, but I mean, but he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I mean, he's a sweetheart. He really is. He
Yeah.
can, you know, um, he's smart, like brilliantly smart. I've worked with him on Mojo Rising. I worked with him on he did the edits for their watching. He's edited me in on multiple short stories. He knows more about my story than I do very quickly. Because usually, because it's like, hey, your story's next. I'm reading it tomorrow, you know. And within 3 days, he's like, hey, here's some edits, and or like I had a really tough rejection from him because it went all the way down into like fourth round.
Mm.
And basically he was like, he goes, this email sucks because I'm rejecting your story. He goes, if I could have another 8,000 words in my story, I would have your story, but I can't. So I'm sorry. It was literally flipping a coin, and I was like, okay, you know, but I mean, I get it. It was one of those stories that couldn't be cut. Even he agreed. He goes, no, dude, you can't cut it. You know, he goes, if you cut it, you're going to lose something.
Mm.
He goes, it's just a long, short story. So, but I managed to get in with him in Lost Films, and getting rejected from your friends who know your work, and they know that, especially if you get rejected because of length or because of context or tone, or if it just doesn't fit. Those are things, that I can always live with, because there's always a market for something, right?
Right.
But to me, being rejected by people that you worked with and they turn around and reject you, and you've made it like several rounds into like an anthology, that tells you that you're on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
You might not have got the acceptance, but you're on the right track because you made it that far. You made it through whoever was reading the slush, and you got that editor to read that story 2 or 3 times before they had to turn it down. So obviously, if you made it past the slush and you got into the first round, they liked something about it.
True.
And to me, it's a lot of times it's just wrong market. So it's one of those things. It's just, you got to keep on going, keep on pushing. I think your friends, especially if they're in the publishing industry, getting your rejection from them is not a bad thing.
No.
It is a good thing.
And especially if you trust them. And, that
Yes.
sounds like that's the type of relationship you have with Max, where he's not going to blow smoke up your ass. If he's looking at your story and, not even talking about you, but more in a hypothetical sense, if he's looking at it and he's going to let you know. Whereas if it's just on the cusp and there's a market for it, but this isn't quite the right fit, you're going to get that nice steer in the right direction. You might want to seek out an anthology that's more geared towards this, or a call that's more geared towards that. And that's invaluable, especially when you compare it to submitting to a complete stranger, where you're going to get, a no thanks, and you're left in that position of, okay, is it too long for you? Is it the wrong, did it not meet the specifications of the call? Did it absolutely suck? And you're none the wiser. You don't know if that's a complete retool or if you can turn around and submit it the next day. So to me, that's invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, because the other side of the coin is that you have like certain publications, especially some of the older ones, the older editors, where you have to print your manuscript. This is still going on. I think for the most part, it's very, very few. But I remember a couple years ago, I had to print a manuscript and mail it in, and then I got rejected on that. And then I had to one that I did an email submission for. In 3 years, the story has been rejected multiple times by multiple people who ended up taking other stories from me. 3 years later, I get the acceptance for the second one, and actually it was a market that I really wanted to get into. 3 years.
That's insane.
And so at that point right there, I was kind of like, well, thank God I didn't sell it. But like, yeah, I'd love for you to publish it, but you can't unless you want to buy second rights. I mean, I don't even know how that works. But, I got really fortunate in there, and it's like you have some people who actually believe in you, and the edits were minimal, and so, but it's just, you just got to keep on plugging away.
Yeah. Brennan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was pausing because I thought you were onto something.
No,
so I mean, we were talking about the podcast, but I mean, we've almost kind of switched full tilt into writing here. So I'm kind of curious about how you got into it. You gave us your kind of initial tilt into the media side of horror, but how did you make that jump into realizing that you wanted to kind of craft your own stuff?
When I was, I don't know, probably about 12 or 13 years old, I read The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. and I really, really liked it. And I had a spiral notebook and a pen, and I started writing my own version of the Martian Chronicles. Because we learn by imitation. We that's how we become inspired. It's like, I want to write like this. What do I do? And the only thing you can do is like, okay, I just read this story. What if I wrote that story? And so, and it's like, even the most famous people in the world have ever done it. Stephen King, him and his brother used to go see movies. His brother had a printing press. They would go see movies and then write their own 30-page novelization of the movies and print them out and try to sell them to people. Now, did 13-year-old Stephen King know that was illegal? No, he didn't know that. He found out, but he found out from very smart adults going, you can't do that. Same thing with me. I turned over the story to my dad, and my dad's like, hey, this is like really good that you're writing and everything like that, but why don't you try to write your own story instead of writing the Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury your way, but it stuck with me. And so I started filling up notebooks with these weird stories, about people coming in from other planets, and they were actually on the planet Earth, and it was like, oh wait, this is like the Planet of the Apes. I was influenced by that too, And so, and I just started writing all this stuff, and it's crazy because I never finished them. I always come about halfway through, and I'm like, oh, I have another idea. So I thought that's what writers do, I didn't know anything about how to create a story or anything like that, but it stuck with me. I wanted to write, and it wasn't until I was probably about 19. No, I was probably about 20 years old, and I was so frustrated with writing, and I wanted to write, and I ended up being in a position where I had a lot of time on my hands. I had a job and going to college, but I still had a lot of time on my hands. Took like a really, really small load in college to try to get my GPA up, and it was a pretty easy course. The next thing I know, I'm going to Writers Guilds and the local Writers Guild, and trying to get involved in the conference and learning how to write, and that was instrumental in learning how to develop story, and we had this Writers Guild, the local one, was one, actually their conference was one of the biggest conferences in the world. They had editors from New York City, Los Angeles, California, all over the world. I think Brian Keene was at one of them, as one of the panelists. So, and then we had, and what I think what really kind of pushed me, and this is how early this was I didn't even know we had a local Writers Guild. I just happened to be reading the newspaper, and I see a picture of these guys, and they're evil looking guys. Okay, and one of them is David J. Scow, and the other one is Richard Christian Matheson, and then the third one was this guy named Joe Lansdale, and they were all taking a picture in Beaumont, Texas, 20 minutes away from where I live, at this writers conference. And I'm like, what the hell is this? These guys are horror writers. I've seen them in the horror magazines and this happened underneath my nose. And I'm like, the next day, I'm at that guild. I'm at that writers guild. When do y'all meet? When are y'all having another conference? Oh, it's not gonna be till next year. And I told them I want to write horror. And I just got involved in it, and we had some really, really great conferences. And of course, like anything else, other things happen, and I kind of, honed my craft, but I kind of got away from it. I had a really, really bad experience with the New York editor, who wanted something of mine, sent it to him, got a terrible rejection letter from him 6 months later. And it really kind of just busted me up. And I didn't do any submitting or anything like that for the longest time. But it never left me, And the thing that got me back into it was actually reading Fight Club and discovering the cult website and getting into transgressive fiction. So, but yeah, and which, I always come back to horror.
Yeah, man. Even if all of us try to escape it, it's just can't
you
do
can
it.
never escape it.
Don't wanna.
I
That's
thought for
real.
sure you were going to give us a, just when I thought I was out, it pulls me back in. A dramatic Godfather reading.
Oh, that's actually
Oh,
from Seinfeld.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
I'm just fucking with you, Brendan.
Crickets.
I know it's from The
Crickets,
Godfather.
Uh, yeah, no, man. It's from Goodfellas. Yeah.
I didn't know if someone was gonna jump in. We're
Nope.
all silly
Waiting
right
for you,
now.
man. We're waiting
Yeah.
for you.
So did
You
you
got to make
talk?
up for that joke.
Yeah, I know. Real awful joke. Did you talk with Scout or Lansdale at all during those early days of your writing career?
No, probably the closest I came, I met with talked with Ridley Pearson, who writes thrillers. He was played in a band with Stephen King. He played bass in the Rock Bottom Remainders.
Hmm.
So he and met Andrew Niedermeyer, who wrote The Devil's Advocate. So a lot of people, I'm sure you've seen that movie with
Yeah.
Al Pacino.
I got the DVD.
Yeah, got it on DVD. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, we met, but some of those like influential, writers, they were there and they were doing other conferences. So of course, they tried to get them back. But I mean, the main thing is that we got a chance to have like a one-on-one with the editor. So they had like a contest. So I submitted like a chapter and a synopsis to the, for the mystery category. And there were like 58 entries and I got into the top 5 and I ended up winning. And then I had a meeting with Michael Seidman, who at the time was the editor of Mysterious Press. So pretty big press. And my one-on-one was absolutely terrible, because you have these delusions of grandeur, like, hey man, I'm probably about to get a writing contract, he's gonna want the whole thing, and you go in there and it's like, so hey, yeah, so I'm the one who won, wanted to get my writing, and he was like, he goes, well, in heavy New York accent, he goes, well, let me tell you something right now. He goes, I'm not going to take this type of story. He goes, it was the best written story out of the 5 that I read. He goes, and so you do have a lot of promise. He goes, but you got a bad cop in your story. I was a cop for 20 years. Ain't no such thing as a bad cop in New York City.
Oh, gosh.
So I'm like going, really? This is in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, man, did you ever see that movie called Rush? And that's a true story. It was based in my area, So anyway, that was, but I mean, he gave me some really good words of encouragement. And, he said, because he even kind of come back and said, he goes, that's kind of harsh. He goes, but he goes, you're young, you're wet behind the ears. Even though yours was the best written, it's not something that I would take. He goes, you've got to hone your craft. He goes, you haven't written 1,000,000 words yet. And I felt like going, well, yeah, since I was born, I've probably written 1,000,000 words. But it took me a while to figure out what he meant. And I probably still haven't written 1,000,000 words, but I'm probably getting pretty damn close. And I still have a lot to learn. It is a constant struggle. And he's not the editor who gave me like a really, really bad time. That was actually Peter Miller, who I don't recommend him at all. He has that I don't know, that kind of swagger. Yeah, I had lunch with John Demme type guy.
You're looking for the word douchebag.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But they and I think he's a book doctor now. But probably one of the coolest people that I ever met there was an older guy named Bill Thompson.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Stephen King's agent.
Yeah, he was Stephen King's editor, his first editor.
Editor, sorry.
Yeah, and Bill tells us, he told the story, and it was really cool about this writer that he knew, who didn't believe in himself and everything like that, and took his first book, which wasn't even that long, and threw it away, and his wife dug it out of the garbage can. And so, this is a story, if you read On Writing, you pretty much know where this is going,
Yeah.
But to hear Bill say, that Steve didn't even know how many zeros went behind 400,000. His hand was shaking so bad, basically, because they had to telegram Steve because he didn't have a phone.
Yeah. Yep.
And he kept saying, we sold the paperback for Carrie for $400,000.
That's crazy.
And Steve's like, $4,000. He goes, no, $400,000. He's like, $40,000. He goes, no. He goes, write a 4 and write 2 zeros and a comma and then 2 more zeros and a period and then 2 zeros. And he's like, that's almost $500,000. He's like, right. And he's like, Steve's like, I'm quitting my job. And I mean, no shit, I would too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back then, this is like what, 1970, I guess probably 73, 74, 75. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. That's quit your job money.
Yeah.
I mean, even today it's quit your job money, but back then that was really, we're set, And it's just
today today it's quit your job money, but you better get going on the next one.
Well, today it's quit your job money and you better be on the way to the broker. Yeah. I want you to double this in 10 years, Well,
I wonder
it's gonna be lean, but
how the hell how would you go about that? I mean, that's a lot of money to gamble on a new author.
Well, when Brian De Palma wants to make your book into a film, that's going to push those paperback rights up.
I guess so.
Yeah, because I mean, Brian De Palma was just coming off of what, Blowout? Yeah, he must have been somewhere around in that area, and Brian's probably one of my favorite early creators, Scarface, Body Double, Dress to Kill. Yeah, but look at it now, it's like, yeah, Brian De Palma made a lot of problematic shit too. So, but it's as far as cinema goes, if you can push that part of yourself back a little bit and enjoy, you can see, a master, and he was pretty hot director at the time, so that's probably what pushed it up to close to the $500,000 mark. And I'm sure Steve probably got points and stuff like that from the movie, and and the rest is history.
Yeah,
dude did okay for himself, I suppose.
Yeah. Bill was great, man. I mean, and I think he's what they call, I think he's like Michael Seidman. He does his own. He's a book doctor. So he does, book doctor's kind of like an editor. It's just a fancy term for somebody. You're paying him, $3,000. He's going to edit your manuscript. Probably give you pointers on what you can do to make it better. Which if you have the patience and you have time, you can do all of that stuff. It takes longer, but it's free. So,
yeah. Brendan, you got anything else on this point?
Well, I was going to say from there, let's talk about Mojo Rising. Now, that one has a whole lot of crime elements mixed in with its horror. Now, is crime writing, and I don't know if I'm describing that right. That's the way I thought of it. I don't know if that's the way you thought of it, though.
Well, I call it weird crime. It is Broken River Books is probably the biggest publisher of what I consider some of the best weird crime that's out there. Gabino Iglesias, of course, J. David Osborne. They straddle that line. There's like a border that they try to cross, to where things get really, really weird. And I've always thought that I love reading crime fiction, especially noir. And I got into a lot of noir around the time I started reading more transgressive fiction, like Fight Club and things like that, Will Christopher Bear, Craig Clevenger, they kind of write in this kind of weird, kind of noir, I guess what I would call almost like, psychological terror type stuff. And it was dark, and it was like, I can write these stories. They don't have to be supernatural. In writing about criminals, criminals are desperate. So you got like everyday good, John Doe, he goes to work every day. He's a nice guy. He's married to his wife. He's got 2 kids. And then he encounters the uncanny, and it wrecks his life. Okay? And so now he's got to become a hero. That story has been done to death. Not that I'll never write a story like that. I probably have an idea for one. But seeing that White Knight is been done to death. I kind of like the idea of, John Doe, who's a meth dealer, who screwed over his the last guy that he was dealing with, and they want him dead. Encounters the uncanny as well, because now you've got somebody who is desperate, who will literally do every single thing they can to survive. That they've already crossed some borders. You see what I'm saying? So writing from a criminal aspect is really good, especially if you got somebody who doesn't really want to kill anybody, but they're on the wrong side of the law. Which in Mojo Rising, that's what you have. You have Brent Junie, who's never, he knows people who kill people, and his own brush with that. He's pretty much kept his nose out of it and just done his job. And that's, and then he's faced with, some really, really weird shit going down.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole, like, I'm glad you threw it out as noir, because I'm like, to my mind, it's crime. And to my mind, it's noir. So to have you kind of validate that makes me feel like, oh, good, cool. I knew what I was reading. But it's, again, personal preference. But when I think of noir, I think of kind of like a city setting. So to have it in rural Texas was really, really cool, really an interesting setting. And there's one character that I'm going to need you to tell me a little bit more about. And I'm thinking of Morris. I need to know where the idea of having this dude stitched together with Kevlar came from.
Okay. Years ago, a guy that me and a bunch of my friends went to school with, and he kind of bounced around, moved from one school district to another. We get out of school, he gets involved with some bad stuff, and he gets shot in the gut, and the bullet splits his liver in half. This is a true story. Stitching him up, he turned septic, almost died, and then his body began to swell. Today, if you look at his hands, he has stretch marks on his fingers. His fingers swell up like sausages. And so now he's about, I think he's maybe 5'7", probably weighs about 150 pounds now. They had to cut off the basically the rotting flesh on his gut because it was, diseased and septic, and they ran out of skin to graft. So they used Kevlar. And so he actually has part of his abdomen is actually Kevlar.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's actually used a lot more than you'd expect it to be used. But it's not as cool as you think it is. He has to wear a back brace, and not because he has back problems, but because over time the Kevlar has stretched and it has lost its structural integrity. So to keep the Kevlar in place, he wears a back brace, not because he has a back problem, but because there's a front plate to the back brace that keeps his gut in place. I have not seen this guy in probably 20 years, but a really, really good friend of mine who actually probably passed away about 6 years ago. And I asked him if he had seen him. And I said, man, how's he doing? He's like, oh man, he just sits around and drinks all day. His liver got split and now he's got scar tissue and now it doesn't affect him anymore. So he can literally drink. He goes, he literally drinks alcohol all day long and can't even get drunk. And he goes, and then he grosses out his friends and shows them his gut. I said, so what happened with his gut? He goes, well, he's got Kevlar there. So it's basically like just like gray, like, almost like carbon fiber. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's really kind of weird. He goes, but part of it's kind of gotten worn, and it's like as it get worn, it stretched. He goes, so he has a section in there, and it's kind of like a window into his abdomen, And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, you could see his intestines moving around in there and shit. And that stuck with me. And so it's whenever I started thinking of Morris, bulletproof, I said, this guy has to be bulletproof. He has to have the Kevlar gut, and that was one of the things I'm like, that what my friend told me is like if he moves, if he's sitting back in his couch or something like that and he moves, he said you could see his intestine, like the coils moving in that thing.
Oh my God.
And I'm like going, dude, that's just nasty. It's just your body, it's just your body. It's, and that's all it is. I mean, it's just, you can just see into his gut, and I'm like, that's just, I'm like, okay, what if it was really alive? And so that was the thing, that what if it was something inside of him that was really moving, and so that was the imagery. So I knew I had to put that shit in the story. But at the same time, in writing Mojo Rising, I realized that I also wanted to play with reality. So, it's one of those stories that, I got lucky. I'm going to tell you right now, I got lucky as hell. I got lucky as hell in the way it turned out. Because, from Max, it was published through Perpetual Motion Machine, and Max is always, he's kind of hinted, hey, do you ever think about doing a sequel to it? I'm like, I do, but I probably won't, because I don't think I can capture lightning in the bottle twice. I got very, very lucky. I had a really good editor who knew what I was trying to accomplish, and I managed to do it. And I think that if I did it now, I would definitely, I could probably play around with some ambiguity, but I probably would not be able to bend reality like that again, because it would be something I would be trying to do, whether it's something that became organic as part of the writing process. So Mojo Rising is what happens when you listen to a lot of Doors.
I knew it. I fucking knew it.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was wondering if are you a huge Doors fan, or is it just that the attitude, I guess, you were going for just fit their music to a T?
And I'm a huge Doors fan, and I follow John Densmore on Twitter. This is the 50th anniversary of Morrison Hotel, which means we will soon be having the 50th anniversary of LA Woman. So because I believe that came out the following year.
Morrison Hotel, that's probably my favorite Doors album, man. It's really good.
Morrison Hotel was instrumental. LA Woman, I started listening to a lot of the Doors, and I get on these kicks, and it was right after a Pink Floyd kick. So if I had started writing Mojo Rising before I started listening to the Doors, it would have been called something else and more aligned with Pink Floyd. So I get like in these kind of musical kicks, and I was listening to a lot of Doors, and I found this picture of Jim Morrison levitating a girl. and I thought this is really, really cool. It's not, he's really not levitating a girl. It's just, it's this really cool picture. If you look it up online, Jim Morrison levitating a girl, you can find it. And it's from a photo shoot he did. And I just got really, really, you know,
That's really
obsessed with
cool.
that. Yeah, it is a
I'm
cool
looking
picture.
at it right now. That's really neat.
And I started realizing that there's a story in a lot of his, in a lot of his lyrics and things like that that aren't necessarily a story that you would expect it to be. It's like I started seeing patterns because I was listening to it so much. So I there were certain songs I said, you know what? I want to put the Doors in this. So I had to consult quite a few people about what I could do, which ain't much, without having to pay. And then we are talking about John, John, at the time Ray Manzarek was still alive, I believe. So, and so you had like the three remaining members, and John Densmore is probably the most protective of anything. It's like if you've heard any Doors song, it had to go through John's desk, and he had to sign off on it. When you hear the Doors in a commercial, it's because somebody fought for that through John, because John's like super protective of their stuff. And it was, I was actually contemplating writing him a letter, or trying, just trying to get to him and just asking permission, but my fear of him going no would have been, and just going thank you, sir. That would have been, it was too much. So I got with some people who knew, the legalities of that, and I found out exactly how much you can use. Like I said, it's not much. Basically, I think you can get a 75% of one line of a song in a story before somebody's going to go, you're going to have to pay for that. So I was very judicious. If you know your Doors, you will see lyrics in there, and if you don't, then you'll just think I'm being really, really trippy and poetic. But and I've reversed some of the things, just to get away with it. There was even, I had to talk with one of my writer friends who has a legal background, who did some research for me. And he said that, Mojo Rising, the way you're spelling it is not the way that they spell it, because you're adding the G. So because without the G, Mojo Rising is Jim Morrison. It's just an anagram. So by adding the G, it makes it not that. So that was a consideration. Do we add a G? Do we not add a G? So finally, we put the G at the end. But there was a company called Mojo Rising that I think they did video game parts, and he said they're branded, so you could run into a problem, but usually titles are safe, especially you have no video games or anything like that inside your story or anything like that, So I was like, no, I really don't. So it worked out pretty good. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that was primarily why I wanted to write it, because I just had this really, cool idea. And, it's, there's some stuff in there. It's about things that I've seen without being, under the influence of alcohol. I have, like, the scene with the Crocodile Girl. I was a witness to something of that nature from the rundown, abandoned, apartment complex hotel. I've seen stuff like that. It's pretty bad.
Well, the whole thing with Morris, the reason I wanted to ask you that is because it was so detailed, and then you recounting it here was like almost word for word with a lot of the descriptions you put in the book. So I read that thinking like he must either have known someone or read a really detailed article that stuck with him at one point,
Mm-hmm.
which of course got me thinking about the rest of it. Any part, like how much is how much is fiction and how much is drawn on that Bob Pastorella Texas lifestyle.
Well, I don't do meth. I never have. But years and years and years ago, when I was a wee lad in my 20s, I did have a small pharmaceutical business on the side that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department really didn't like it. They didn't like my hours, probably, So, and of course, when you do that, when you're selling pharmaceuticals, ecstasy, to people, and it's shitty. It's like 2 years before that was actually fucking legal. So anyway, we couldn't use that. We didn't know it was illegal. No, they changed the law on us. That's not fair. We were discriminating businessmen.
Yeah.
But you run across some savory characters, and you get to see things that the average Joe doesn't get to see. We see, I seen people taking a girl very much like Crocodile Girl out of a house, and she was a heroin addict, and her arm had abscessed to the point to where there was bone exposed in the crook of her elbow, and it was like, this girl's gonna die, and sadly she did, so it's just, that stuff sticks with you, and it's stuff that when people say I don't have anything to write about, and it's like, yeah, you do. You just got to think.
On the
you just
line,
got to think about those years between like 16 and 24.
Yeah.
No matter who you are, you did so much stupid shit that you can pull from.
Exactly.
On the lines of Jim Morrison, one of the scenes in The Stand, it's an earlier one, is when Big Tex and his friends are shooting the shit, and they talk about how they saw this guy ask for directions, and it was quote unquote Jim Morrison after he's, his supposed death. And I don't know why that's always stuck with me. My brother and I really dig the Doors. We're into the 70s and mainly 60s and 70s rock, and the Doors is just one of the bands that we like, and I just think that's really cool. I don't know why I've thought of that for years as being one of my favorite scenes, but it just made me wonder, there's more to that story if that were a true story, and it's probably never going to get written, but that's my contribution to this whole specific Jim Morrison topic. All right, so Bob, moving to your other latest book, They Were Watching with Michael David Wilson, let's just start off with a baseline of how'd that come about?
That's the $50,000 question. That actually started. Me and Michael decided that we wanted to write something, and he had an idea, and we had collaborated, on articles on the website. We collaborated on the podcast. And he said, "Hey, we ought to try writing a book. I have an idea," and so he pitched the idea to me. And I liked it, and I think it basically, the thing that's really the catalyst for it, which I'm definitely not trying to come out of left field here, was we both have a mutual admiration of a film called Kill List. Have either one of y'all ever seen the film Kill List?
Haven't seen it, heard about it.
Yeah, so Kill List, I really liked how you have a film that starts one way and ends somewhere else, but everything is logical. It all fits. And we were talking about that, and he said, I have an idea that may work for that. And we started bouncing this idea back and forth and building on it, via email. And so we knew that we wanted to have, a guy who was, we decided that we wanted to cover voyeurism, but we didn't want to do it in a skeezy way. We wanted to basically, of course, now, 2020, hindsight's 2020, so we can say, but at the time we just basically, we knew we didn't want to get problematic with it, but we also knew that we needed to get provocative with it. There's a massive difference between, you know, something being erotic and sexy and something being, you know, borderline stalking. And so we wanted to write to where we had a protagonist who really ultimately believes that he is not a stalker. He is, but you don't really begin to lose sympathy for him until he starts to make some really organically dumb decisions. You know, decisions that like the normal person would be like, you know, I'm kind of thinking, don't trust anyone. I need to move because something weird is going on. But that's not what he does. So we basically bounced these ideas around, built up an outline that was really a good outline, and then we decided, you know, to start writing. And I wrote the beginning section because it was, you know, a new place, so we wanted to have that fish out of water and emphasis on the word fish. So that definitely came into play with the apartment, Pelagic Court, you know, and getting him into to where we ultimately knew he needed to basically the catalyst of the story. Which in the original draft took us a lot longer to get there. So, but that's, you know, we fixed that. But yeah, I would write a section, email it over to Michael. He would go through it and add a section. And then he would send that back to me. I'd go through his edits that he had on mine. I would go ahead and go through his, and then I would add a section. So as we continued on, there were certain sections that, you know, at the very beginning, we were kind of going through like from the very beginning of the story all the way down to, but we started leaving, okay, we're going to move on from this beginning part. Let's go here. So with each chapter, we just kind of kept building on it. Because knowing that, hey, we're going to have to read all the stuff again anyway. So, you know, and originally it was a novella. It was basically clocked in probably around 20,000 words. It was for a specific market. It did not make it into that market. But we liked what we had. The beta readers liked it. And then we decided to expand it. So we dumped a character. We made two characters' roles a lot bigger, and we added another character. And so that got it up to 30,000 words. And so we got some more beta readers involved, and based upon their suggestions, and I'm really hard-headed on a lot of things. There were some suggestions that I was totally against at first, just adamantly, like it's not going to happen. And after a couple of days of deep thinking, I realized that, hey, they're on the right track. We need to follow this lead. And it made me realize that we had not really neglected to do something, but we needed to do something to our protagonist. And so that's what basically ramps up the story. You know, but it was a hell of a lot of fun. You know, every project's different. Like my current work in progress right now, I'm not outlining at all. And I'm getting a lot of words on the page. I don't know if they're good or not, because I'm just going to keep going till I'm done. And then I'll try to figure it all out later, but I just need to complete it. You know, that's the goal. And so we, you know, but this particular project, because of all the twists and turns and things like that, we wanted to definitely have an outline. And so we built up from there, and there just comes a point when you just got to start writing it. And that's what we did.
Yeah, Brendan, why don't you offer your thoughts first?
Well, I was wondering, when you say that you traded back and forth and wrote section by section, do you mean chapter, or did you guys have kind of a set length, or just fall into a pattern?
It was more or less fall into a pattern. It wasn't chapter by chapter. we definitely made sure that we did not leave anyone hanging. We did not leave each other hanging. So if we ended a chapter, it was, and I guess more like a common courtesy is like, hey, I'm going to start the next chapter. So, my email would be, hey, ended chapter 13, started chapter 14. Wait till you see where I left you at, so, and then we go from there, and we literally we wrote scenes. It's, it, because each chapter has probably at least, if I don't know, we never even counted up, maybe at least at least two scenes per chapter, or a continuation of a scene or something like that. So in I guess that kind of, because me and both Michael are very visual writers. I think we did a good job of incorporating all the senses. But I mean, in most stories, it's sound, in your vision. So, dialogue and what you see. And that's where we are strongest at. And both me and Mike are really good at dialogue. And so, and we knew it was going to be a dialogue heavy, story. And, so that was areas that we had a lot of confidence in. So it was more or less scenes. We really didn't, do as a chapter. I didn't think it would be fair to do like a whole chapter and like, okay, you have to do the next chapter. Well, what if he had an idea that he wanted to incorporate into that, so he'd have to go in and change it. So it was more or less scenes. There are certain scenes that I know in the narrative that we have now. I know I wrote those scenes, but for the most part, there's a lot of scenes I can't remember. I can't remember, nor can I tell who wrote what.
Just one more question to piggyback on Brennan's. Did you guys edit for your first draft? Like during your first draft, is that when you started editing each other's works?
Yes.
Oh wow.
In the first draft, we were already editing. I edit even in my own stuff. I kind of edit as I go. And the reason why is because a lot of people do that, and it's something I learned, and it gets you back into the flow. If you don't know where you're going in your story, or you feel a little trepidation about getting into it area, go back over to section before. You'll find something wrong. Doesn't matter if it's a typo, misplaced word, misused word.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you're like, oh yeah, and hold on, I used that word twice in the same paragraph. Okay, and so you start tinkering with it, and next thing you know, you're down to where you left off, and you can continue on. And that's something Joe Lansdale talks about all the time. He edits as he goes. He learned that because he started writing on a typewriter. Finger punching one finger at a time. And so it's kind of like, and Elmore Leonard was the same way. He would write, and if he made one mistake on that typewriter, he would take the page out and start a fresh page and type it till that page was complete.
Good God.
Yes. So yeah.
Sounds expensive.
That's how they wrote. That's how they wrote back then, man. So they edit as you go, and that's but I mean that it's not like that's a final edit. That's a rough draft edit.
Right.
Once you get done, you got to go and you check for consistency, continuity, stuff like that.
I like the amount of kind of care for your co-author you guys put in there, both kind of taking into consideration that you don't kind of own a scene, that the other person gets input on that, but also, not leaving them in that tenuous, I have this character dangling literally off the edge of a cliff. Let's see how you figure that out, man. I've said before that my two favorite things about the writing in this book are, I love the pacing. I found that there was just not a good place to put it down. And the sense of unease that you guys built, where you never quite are sure where you're going next. And if you think you know, there's a fair chance that you're mistaken. And a lot of that is that, again, no pun intended, fish out of water. The person in a new place. So speaking of that, I wonder, what was it like for you trying to write about a place you're going to be unfamiliar with, whether it's the dialogue, the lingo, how much how much did you have to ask about, what words to use and what words to stay away from?
Well, as far as setting goes, it was fairly easy because where I live about an hour away from the beach, and so I've spent a lot of time on the coast and stuff like that. And I'm more or less, excuse me, I'm more or less, I guess what you call like a beach bum, and not a woodsy type guy. I've seen the Blair Witch too many times, and you can't get me to go camping. If you do and you try to play a prank on me and you build like a wooden teepee, I'm going to stick it up your nose. So, and then I'm going to be in the truck for the rest of the trip. And then you're going to be shamed. But yeah, so I'm a beach guy. So I knew the coast. I knew, and I've seen, these areas. So that was easy. It was, writing. I wrote it the way that I wanted to, the way I envisioned it in my head. Since we set it in England, fortunately, I had Michael there to correct my evil ways.
Stupid Americans.
Yeah, hobo wanker. But anyway, he knows he like we have a car trunk, they have a car boot. We have a shopping cart, they have a shopping trolley, so it's they have curious words for the normal words, but it's words that Brian wouldn't say. He wouldn't say, I grabbed the shopping cart. It's actually used for something else. He wouldn't call it a trunk of a car. He called it the boot of the car. So I mean, it's like, it was just little bitty things like that. And I trusted his judgment on it, because he grew up in England. I guess he kind of knows, so it wasn't very hard. And there were some things that he wrote that were like way too British. It was like, that's not going to fly. He didn't understand. There was one section, and I'm not really spoiling anything by saying this, but he questioned how low a door was, how close the bottom of a door was to the floor of a room. And so, yeah, I know I just seen you on your camera. You looked.
Yeah, it's like an inch, right?
Yeah, it's about anywhere from I guess a half inch to almost a whole inch, because you could have carpet leading up to the door. You could have crown molding around the edge of the door, and so and Michael's like, well, in England, it's less than half an inch. I'm like, okay. And you also got to keep in mind that if you got hardwood floors and you're built in a house, if your house is on piers, the house is going to settle. Then you end up with a stuck door. He's like, how's that happen? And I'm like, well, because maybe it doesn't happen in England, but I mean, it happens in the United States. I said, but I think a half an inch is good, So I mean, those were type of things that we went back and forth on. It was like little technical details. Yes, I did imagine myself tied to a chair. So, it was almost at the point to where I was ready to have my roommate actually tie me to a chair, but I didn't go that far. just to see. It's like, hey, but then of course it had been like, hey man, you broke my chair. So yeah, yes I did. But some of the things that we went back and forth on it's amazing, but they're extremely important. You wouldn't think they would be, but it's things that a reader would go, whoa, that doesn't fly. And we wanted to make sure that there was no way we were going to take the reader out of the story.
It's kind of like, a movie or video game. If you're playing it and you don't notice anything, background-wise, music, sound effects, whatever. That's good on the part of the person that did the technical stuff, but just like you said, if you don't have anything that jive, if you got something that doesn't jive with the flow of everything, you're gonna notice it. So yeah, they are crucial to nail those facts.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say the ending. I won't spoil it, but the ending did throw me off. Didn't expect it. Really loved it. Curious how the majority of people are gonna take it. I feel like you and Michael may be in that same camp too. But Brennan, what are your vague thoughts on that? The ending.
What are my vague thoughts on the ending? I would echo you. I kind of turned that last little bit and I said, well, I didn't really expect we were going there. But like I said, I kind of felt like one thing this really did for me, and it's one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much, is it kept me off kilter the entire time.
Yeah.
And that even, applies to the last page. You kind of never really know what exactly is going on, how much you can trust of what you see and what you're told, how much you can rely on different characters and the validity of what they're saying. There's just, to me, the whole atmosphere of it is just kind of this one of mistrust, I guess. And I thought that was awesome. You don't get to settle into it. And it's the perfect length for it. It's Michael picked on me because I thought it was a novella. He said that word count takes it up into novel range, so I won't make that mistake again.
Well,
But
I question that, and I know he's good at his knowing his stuff, but I've always thought it was 50,000 is the low point for novels.
see, my excuse was I read it on Kindle, and so I knew what percentage I was at. I don't know what frickin' page I'm on. But I thought it was the perfect length to pull that off, because that could in a longer form work, I think that could be a little too much. But for that long novella / short novel, keeping the reader kind of on their toes and unsure of what's going on for the entire thing, first of all, can't be easy, but second of all, it's an accomplishment. It's I can't really think off the top of my head of another novel that I could, or novella that I could compare that to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, and I appreciate that. And it is a short novel. It's all depending on which criteria you look at.
Mm.
But I think the modern criteria now, and this all comes from publishers. I mean, here's the thing: a story is a story is a story, right?
Right.
It's basically the market is going to dictate what they're going to call it.
Mm.
And so based upon those concerns, the market has the cutoff point around 40,000 words. Anything above that is considered a novel. So it may not be a long novel.
Yeah.
But it's a what we call a short novel. Fight Club is barely a novel. So that's the way, Mojo Rising could have been a novel. If I'd had another probably another 10,000 words to it. I didn't think it needed it. I was happy with novella. I'm happy with the short novel because I know readers' attention spans compared to my next work, which I mean is probably going to push about 90,000.
Okay.
So, that's gonna be my magnum opus.
Nice.
So my big epic. It's probably not. It's probably gonna cut down to about 75, which is pretty good for a novel. But
You said that in the same breath. It's got to be my magnum opus. Kidding.
That's funny though that you mentioned that, because I would definitely have that thought if I have a book that, like, if I have a book in the last year or so that somebody sends me and it's around that 190 page mark, I'm almost kind of teetering on saying, oh, it's a novella, but you're right, it's a short novel. And like, I've got Fight Club right in front of me. I've never ever considered whether or not that's novel length.
But you always considered it a novel.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So you're right. Market, and typically you wouldn't unless you're Stephen King, you wouldn't get your novella published with a hardcover. So I mean, there's that too.
Now,
that's an interesting way of looking at it.
I want to hit on something because and this is I guess important, and I'm trying to do it without spoilers, but the ending, did it feel like it was coming out of left field, or did it was it just a direction that you're thinking back, you're like, oh, they did kind of set this up, but we didn't think it was going to go there.
That's you took the words out of my mouth. I didn't think it would go there.
I didn't think it would go there. It came out of left field in the sense where it surprised me. It makes sense because the whole time, I don't know if I can trust the narrator. I don't know if I can trust his sister, the girl in the video. I mean, the girl next door in the room.
Yeah, the girl in the video.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like
can't trust her character. Either, man.
No. Yeah.
But think about it though. Not spoiling anything. There is a girl in the video later on.
Okay.
They're one and the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. I mean, it's two things that I insist upon. It has to be logical and has to be unpredictable. Because that's what I look for in stories. If I can figure it out, then you really got to bring it home on me. There's a thing called dramatic irony. And what that is like when your reader knows something that the characters does not know. This is not one of those stories because we kept everything hidden from you based upon POV. And so it's all point of view. If we would have switched POV to at least one character, then you would have never known. It would have taken you would have known everything that Brian didn't know. So we couldn't do that. It was, it didn't work for the story. But you got a novel like Daniel Krause's Bent Heavens, that if you do manage to figure it out, something that the characters don't know. And as the story progresses, it gets worse for the characters. Because you're just like, once and Michael read out, I kept badgering him. I said, man, you got to read this book. You got to read this Bent Heavens. And he didn't figure it out. I figured it out early. And it just made it worse for me. But Michael almost had the same thing. When he finally hit that point and he emailed me and he was like, oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, I know where you're at. He's like, this book just went up a whole new level.
I really enjoyed
it.
No, I have not read that one, but I really enjoyed the conversation you guys had with Daniel Krause. And like many horror fans, George A. Romero, he's been pretty much an idol. It's a weird two guys, but him and Kevin Smith, for me, as a storyteller, as filmmakers, as writers, they're my two top that I have loved since I've been a little kid. And to hear the guy that's written the book with Romero, I was eating it up. It was fantastic. Daniel seems like a real nice guy too.
Mm-hmm.
And he does.
One more thing. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Andy does something that I don't do with the two books I'm in anthologies now. I did in the beginning, but I'm not anymore. I hope I continue doing what he does whenever I get a novel published. Don't read the fucking comments. Don't read the reviews unless it's like, a friend that tags you. I think that's a good way to protect your mental health. Whether it's a good seriously, whether it's a good comment or bad, how's that going to change how I write my next book? I don't want it to.
When it comes to reviews, I kind of take what Lloyd Barron has said about reviews. If you're going to really, really like the 5-star reviews, you need to pay attention also to the 1-star reviews. Yeah. So you got to put them all in the same category.
That could be a headache.
Yeah.
I was going to say just one last thing on the whole idea of trust. I know that Ted was not in the original 20,000 word version that you guys put together. And to me, that surprises the hell out of me because he felt like the hinge. Like, if I can figure out this character's motivations, then everything else drops into place for me. If I can figure out whether this character is on the level and can be trusted, that's going to give me some solid ground to stand on. Again, at least that's the way I kind of looked at it.
Mm-hmm. The way the novella plays out, if you can imagine, at the point where Brian realizes that someone else is watching, and then he follows that person, and then if you take out all of Ted, and then add back in the end, that was the novella, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Ted's
So
my favorite character.
Ted was a game changer.
Yeah.
He amped it up. And it's crazy. His name was originally Ted, and it somehow got changed to Bill. And and we had him with Bill forever, man. It was Brian and Bill, and one of the beta readers said, "Don't you think that's like just too many B's?" And we decided to change it back, and and it was weird because Michael's like, he goes, "I want to call him Ted." And I was like, "Ted?" He goes, "That was his original name because we've been calling him Bill for so long." And I was like, "Oh yeah, it is," But yeah, Ted is actually Michael's. That he come up with that character, and he was a lot of fun to write. He was a lot of fun to write.
Fun to read too.
Oh yeah, he was fun. Ted's a trip. And even though I know he's not necessarily from England, there's like I picture, what's his name? He's in The Boys.
I haven't seen it.
He played Dredd, and he played Judge
Carl
Dredd.
Urban.
Huh? Yeah, Carl Urban. His name. I see him as Ted.
You could write some other
that.
stories with him. Ted's the kind of character where you could have a whole series.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Given what he does for a living.
There's a way it could be done.
Yeah.
There's a way it could be done. Well put.
Now, one thing I would like to say on their watching is, and I know you're going to know what I'm talking about, but just to preface it, so I told Michael first, after I finished reading it, I talked to him before you, and I said that it reminded me of a few things, and I won't say why with most of them, but one thing was Midnight on the Meat Train for end-in reasons in the realm of that story. Another one was Hot Fuzz for an England small village. Maybe it's not a small village, but that's how I read it as an American that's never been to England, and the type of denizens that live there. It just felt like a serious, dramatic version of Hot Fuzz. And I love that movie, so I only mean that as a very big compliment. Now, I know your feelings on Hot Fuzz before, when it first came out. I know that you watched it recently because you just posted about that. Now, is that going to be something where you're like rolling your eyes if you keep getting that comparison?
No, I won't. I mean, it would be as though if an Angel were Brian and Ted mixed together, that would make a lot of sense. You see what I'm saying?
Huh. I never even thought of that.
He's both Brian. He's a fish out of water.
Yeah,
and he's both Ted. He's a hard ass cop.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, that's the impression that I got. The town, there's some aspect of that town and the way it's ran that kind of falls in there, and it's crazy because he's seen Hot Fuzz. I haven't really seen it till the other night, and this is after the book was written. And he had never seen Body Double. And so we wrote this book, and I said, dude, you have to watch Body Double because it is a major influence on here. And when we were coming up with the synopsis and the tagline, we had, we wanted to create some visuals. And he finally watched Body Double, and he was like, holy shit. He goes, dude, it's like there's so many parallels. It's crazy.
I've actually never seen that, so I'm not going to act like it did.
Now, I will tell you this: that you got to keep an open mind if you watch Body Double. Brennan, have you ever seen it?
I have not. No.
No. This is a movie that Brian De Palma made after he got into an argument about almost getting X rating on Scarface.
Yeah, for the shower scene, which is horseshit.
Yeah, so he almost got an X rating on that, and Brian De Palma made basically Body Double was the Hold My Beer movie.
Yeah.
Okay, it is. Being perfectly honest with you, it is misogynistic. It is fucking problematic as fuck. You need to know that going in, okay? But it will also seriously fuck you up in a good way. When you get done, you'll be like, that was actually pretty damn good.
It's kind of like that Chuck Palahniuk quote when I heard him talking with Michael, where basically any time, which I recommend to anyone listening to this, check out that interview. It was really informative as a writer, as a reader, I imagine too. But he said that whenever someone has an issue with a scene that is questioned, basically he says, I'm gonna turn it up a few notches. And I like that approach myself.
Yeah, it's Chuck allowed me to I guess conquer some fears I had on writing, and and to write fearlessly. But I also combined that with something that Colson Whitehead said. And Colson Whitehead did a talk, and one of his best quotes that he did was, especially when it concerns if you're taking on the POV of the other. So this makes a lot of sense. You can write whatever you want to write about. Just don't fuck it up. And so if you're a white person and you want to write from the POV of a black person, as long as you're not claiming that is the black experience,
right?
Because you don't have authority to speak to that way.
No.
As long as you don't fuck it up, you've pretty much got his permission. This is how we write different characters, and so that's real important. And to be able to write fearlessly, you need to have that kind of, that kind of attitude going in, and to make sure that I do this respectfully and don't fuck it up, So.
Yeah, I love that quote. It really irks me when people, and I got no one specifically in mind, but when you get advice saying that, like, if you're insert whatever, gender, sex, race, whatever, you can't write this. You can't write from this. That's how you learn. That's how, as long as you do your proper research, I would suggest with certain things, and you do it, like you said, respectfully. Talk to people,
Yeah,
like
it's fun.
Like me myself, like I got this horror that I want to kind of build in the Wampanoag history. The Indians that met the Pilgrims for the first Thanksgiving. Like, I got a lot of research to do because I know some stuff, but I got a lot more to learn. So that's the approach you take. You got to do it and ask the right people too. Would be, I would think, the best way.
Right.
Sensitive readers that know what they're talking about.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and the thing is that people are always going to criticize everything, anything, whatever they can find. And you got to realize that the same people that will sit there and tell you that you can't do something are the same people that are going to get pissed off when your entire cast is white males. Think about that.
Agree, absolutely.
It's like if you wrote The Thing today,
yeah,
and no women, just a bunch of guys. Well, there were no women then. They would criticize that. Of course there were. So I think that's one of the things that the prequel did good. It was probably the only thing is they had a little bit more diverse cast, right. But other than that, the prequel sucked. So
I love those pieces of writing advice because I've been sitting here playing almost mental gymnastics with them for the last 2 minutes, and at first glance, write fearlessly and don't fuck it up, seem to be at odds with each other. But if you kind of combine them into one, I'm gonna say catch all. I don't know if I agree with that way of phrasing it, but it works. It's like you need both of them to create something that's going to be unique, that's going to have, um, that's going to tell the story that you want to tell, if you, and that's going to do it in a way that people are going to want to read it and not just say, oh, that's all white males, I don't want to read that, throw it out. But yeah, I that's something I'm going to think about a little bit more. So, Bob, we've taken up a lot of your night. It's really late here, which means it's pretty late there.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, is there anything you're reading right now or have been reading in October that you'd like to share with people?
What I'm reading right now is I'm reading Dear Laura by Gemma Amor, and I'm gonna probably finish this in a couple of days. It's a novella, and wow, it's pretty dark. And this is and I think I got White Pines. I think I'm gonna read that next. Other than that, I've been reading a lot of Peter Straub. Mainly because my work in progress. If it wasn't for the throat, then I probably wouldn't have a work in progress. There's a lot of things I could say about my work in progress. It's like if it wasn't for Mothman, there wouldn't be a work in progress. But yeah, it's so that's I've been reading a lot of that. But I'm trying to think of the last book that really wowed me was probably the Sundown Motel by Simone St. James, I think. That knocked my socks off. That was awesome. Highly recommended. It's worth the money, and if you get it on a book bub for $2-3, you need to snag that one. It's a good one. Yeah, it's good. Who does book bub?
Hunter Shea was talking about Mothman. That guy loves his cryptids.
Yeah, that's Mothman is really cool. That's what I'm gonna say about that.
I've only seen the movie.
You haven't seen it?
No, I've only seen the movie.
Oh,
I haven't read the book.
The book's a lot different than the movie because the book is more of a nonfiction account that John Keel, what happened whenever he went on that trip.
Right.
The movie has got a lot more dramatic points to it, and some things that actually didn't happen. But I mean, it kind of captures the spirit of it. But there's some really creepy shit in that movie, and of course, Richard Gere, he's good. But to me, the highlight were the scenes with Will Patton, because Will Patton can do no wrong. He is one of my favorite actors. Very underrated, and he the scenes he's in, he chews up scenery and knocks it out of the park.
I really like how you managed to tell us what you were reading and get me excited about your work in progress all in one swing. Very nice job there.
That's what I do.
And I loved Dear Laura. I thought that was a fantastic book. I'm midway through White Pines right now, but Dear Laura was really something. That was a book that stuck with me long after I finished it.
Yeah, I know it, and it's like I'm seeing my progress, and I'm like, man, I feel like I'm at 30%. I'm like, oh my god. I mean, I'm gonna, and every time I read it, I'm like, now I'm at 40%. And I'm like, oh man, this is gonna come to an end like really quick, and it's probably gonna just knock the shit out of me. And so I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, we talked earlier about what the novella versus short novel versus novel and all that. Like that's to me, that's one of the better examples I've read in the last year of what you can do, what you can pull off with a novella, how much story you can get in there, and with the right pacing and the right ability to tell a story, which Gemma has in spades, just what you can accomplish in that short time. Patrick, what are you reading, man?
Right now, I'm reading Tim Wagner's. Is that how you say it? Because I heard Hunter Shea say Wagoner. Is it Wagner or Wagoner?
I think it's Wagner.
Okay, so, thank you. I'm reading Tim Wagner's Writing in the Dark. It's got. I feel like it's gonna be the go-to book for writing horror.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all I got to say for that right now, because we're gonna be talking to him next week. So I want to save what I can say to him.
It's a good book. It's a good book. I read it. Yeah.
How about you, Brian?
Well,
Brennan, what are you reading?
that was a really good one. I'm like maybe 90% through it right now, so I guess I can't technically say was, but I think another 20 pages and I'll be able to say was. I just started. We were talking about Broken River books earlier. I just started Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias, and 3 chapters in, I am hooked. I knew going in that it was a mosaic novel, so I'm like really taking my time with it, paying attention. I want to see how the puzzle pieces fit together, and see how they kind of come together to tell that larger story. But man, that first chapter really got my attention. I think I'm going to enjoy this one.
I've seen Gabino read from that book prior to its publication at KillerCon in person, and if you ever get a chance to see him read in person, it's very passionate. You will thoroughly enjoy it, and he doesn't hold back. He's not going to explain the Spanglish at all. and it's beautiful coming from his mouth. It's just, I didn't understand half the words, and I was just like, oh wow, this is going to be something. And I really enjoyed it. He is something else. He is really something else.
He's an exciting personality, to say the least.
That's one thing I noticed too. The mix of the Spanish with the English is there are some parts where you'll see a character kind of paraphrase their own phrase, so you kind of know what they're talking about, but not every time. You're right. It doesn't. There are definitely some you have to either keep a dictionary on hand for, or use context clues to figure out what's going on, or remember your high school Spanish. But that's far down the list.
It doesn't take it away from it, even if you don't understand it. It's and I'm a firm believer that there are works of fiction that you can read, that there are parts of that you don't understand, that even the author doesn't understand. Case in point, read Brian Evanson and listen to our interview with him, because I asked him that, and he's kind of like, yeah, a lot of that stuff I'm just trying to figure out myself, and I don't. So that's, to me, it doesn't take away from it. It's part of the beauty. It's part of the art.
That's like
life. It's very authentic too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, where can people follow you? Where can people follow your podcast?
Well, we are on the website. It's thisishard.co.uk. Definitely not .ko. I don't know where that goes to. I have no idea.
Girls and videos.
Probably. The girl in the video, Michael's probably like, I got it going to that page. So anyway.
And it's really Max Booth in a Hello Kitty mask.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, Josh Mallerman films it. That's my joke. Sorry.
That makes so much sense.
What a lacked in quality it made up for.
It what? You just kind of lagged out there.
I said what your joke lacked in quality, it made up for in length.
And on Twitter, you can find me at Bob Pastorella. That's probably the easiest place to find me. I'm on Facebook. I will not accept your friend requests there. Just letting you know, I'm pretty much. It's a promotional tool that's not working out very well. So I have friends that are on Facebook that are not on Twitter. I miss them, so I will lurk a little bit, which is bad, because if I do comment, it's almost invariably I will deactivate again. So they'll be like trying to like my comment or something like that, and they can't. So if I do get on there, I try to stay on there for like a day or two, but then you'll see that I'm gone. It's like, well, he was here, Drifter, and now he's not here. Right. But Twitter I get so much more engagement there. It's a lot more fun, I think. And, follow me. Follow me. Doesn't mean I'll follow you back, but follow me.
Brendan, any final words? Any thoughts?
No, I thought about asking you to address the rumor of whether Michael David Wilson was in fact a real person or some sort of deep fake, but I'm not sure that's fair to put you in that position. I thought about asking you to address the rumor that you'll be fighting Laurel Hightower at some point, but I don't, I don't want to, put you on the spot.
I don't even know what the hell that's all about. I mean, and here's the thing: I'm sure Laurel probably doesn't either. I think that we're going to be, me and Mike are going to be on their show coming up like real soon, like when I think the weekend.
Oh,
so yeah, so they're all kind of gearing up for some kind of stupid wrestling thing, and it's like, and I think in one of the social media comments I said this is pretty much like I'm like Andy Kaufman. I'm not going to be a very good wrestler, so that's just not my thing. But I know it's probably going to be a lot of fun, and that's probably going to come up. But yeah, I think Michael is. I think it's amazing what technology can do with deep fakes. Just leave it at
that. So, Bob, any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? I want everybody to get. They're watching. It's coming out Halloween, October 31st. It's available for pre-order. There's links on the website. If you go to thishishorror.co.uk, you can find the article there with the links. It's on Amazon on the ebook. Me and Michael put a lot of work into it, and I think you're really, really going to enjoy it. I hope you do. And I'm really excited for it to be out in the wild. I mean, it's 2 weeks away, and I'm getting the butterflies already. So that's and I love that feeling. And this is the first thing that I've had out since my story in Lost Films. So, and it's kind of like, hey, I've been away, but I'm kind of back. So I got that kind of nervousness too. And but yeah, if it wasn't for their watching, it really kind of got me back into writing, especially this last little bit where we really kind of ramped it back up. Because I went like basically almost a whole year without doing anything, and that sucked. I watched played a lot of games and watched a lot of movies though. So yeah,
Me and Brendan highly recommend. They're watching, both read it, loved it. Check them out at This Is Horror on Twitter. That is their username. Also, you can check in the the episode notes for the link for the pre-order. But the day this comes out, it will be available 1 day from now. This will be October 30th. Bob, thank you for talking to us for nearly 2.5 hours. Brennan, thank you for being here as always. I appreciate you. Listeners, appreciate you listening and hopefully spreading the word. You can follow us at dead_headspace on Twitter. That is the best place to reach us. We don't have a Facebook. We never will. Fuck Facebook. Have a good night, guys.
Alrighty.